Hey, everybody. Welcome to The World of Rare Disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. My name is Lisa Deck, and I'm a rare disease patient, a Rare New England board member, and your host for today's show. With me hosting today as well is Kevin Freiert. Kevin is a fellow Rare New England board member and founder of Salem Oaks. Today, we have a unique event happening in that we are doing this live with our guest. Our guest is Marni Cartelli. She is a rare disease patient who has complex regional pain syndrome. In the past year, Marni has faced her disease with a new outlook, and she has found a strength she didn't even know she possessed. But we're going to look at what life is really like living with rare disease. Today's show will discuss Marni's disease, her challenges, her victories, and her future. We are looking at how to manage life as a rare disease patient. We are so excited to have you here, Marni. I was just saying I'm thrilled to share her with everybody. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me today. It's a pleasure. I'm really honored to be here and to discuss such an important topic, just managing every day with a rare disease or a chronic condition. I feel like it's something that we often don't talk about, just the day-to-day stuff.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's great to see you again, Marni. We haven't gotten to actually see each other in such a long time, and this is the closest we can come. So let's take advantage of it. I think the first thing to start, before we get into too much of it, but just what is CRPS? You know, what's your story behind that? And then we can get into what it's like living with it. Maybe those two things are too intertwined for you to pull apart now.
Oh, no, I mean, well, CRPS stands for Complex Regional Pain Syndrome. It is formerly called reflex sympathetic dystrophy, and before that it was named 198 other things in the history of the disease. So it is a debilitating, painful chronic condition, but it's associated with sensory, motor, autonomic, and bone abnormalities as well. So it's a multi-system condition, whereas it usually originates from an inciting injury, and then you get a disproportionate response by the body to the injury. I often just simplify it by saying my body didn't heal right. It never got the message for the signals to turn off. And then what happens is your brain learns by repeat. So the signals keep going up to your brain. They never shut off. And then once they're in your brain, they can go out to the rest of your body like haywire, and everything can go haywire. But really, it's a dysautonomic disease. It's a disease of your autonomic nervous system. And so any area that your nerves are innervated can be affected by the disease. I happen to get a lot of dysfunction in my limbs. I get tremors, they will swell, they'll go gaunt. Other people get affected internally in their internal organs. I have not had any effects there, knock on wood. People have trouble regulating their respirations, heart rate, different things like that. I had one incident that was very scary where that happened. But I think it was just one of those situations where my body was yelling at me, take it down a notch. I didn't listen. It happened during Rare Disease Week in Washington. And my body decided to shut me down when I didn't listen. But other than that, my symptoms stick to the pain and dysfunction of the limbs.
Right. It's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to ask the second half of that. So that sounds pretty heavy. What's it like living with it, and how does it affect? I mean, you were at Rare Disease Week, a big event for you, something you wanted to do, and it just knocked you out. But I'm sure every day you're dealing with something with that.
It's a carnival ride. I think the most important thing and what I want to stress is I feel like many conditions, Ehlers-Danlos, many different conditions, my experience is very different from somebody else diagnosed with the same exact condition, like I described. So even for me, I can wake up daily with different symptoms, different intensity of the symptoms. And there's somebody else with the same exact diagnosis in the same exact limbs that is having an entirely different experience. I think that is one of the most confusing, awe-inspiring, but basic realities of rare and chronic disease that I think doctors, lay people, family members, everybody needs to understand, because you can look at me and you can look at somebody else with the same disease and be like, how do these, but she's walking around, but she's not walking around. And tomorrow I might not be walking around because I can't put any pressure on my leg. So it's very hard for me to answer what is it like living with this disease. It's more of what is it like coping? Because that is the most important part to me, is to find the coping mechanisms of accepting that I don't know what tomorrow is going to be like. I don't even know what the second half of today might be like half the time. And that kind of ties in with what we're going to talk about, is that I never dealt with that. And until 2020, when advocacy in the world that I knew it as shut down because of COVID, I was go, ignore that. And then I got faced with that, slammed in my face of I never dealt with the weight of my own situation. And so the last year has really been about delving into the weight of, whoa, I have to figure out how to live the rest of my life with a condition that I don't know how to predict. Or is there a way for me to predict how I'm going to feel? Have I ever stopped to really listen to my body? And that was really what this year has kind of been about, and what I've been trying to do with myself. So I don't know if I really answered your question, and I apologize.
I think you answered it perfectly. And I think you make a really important point there, that each person's disease, particularly in rare disorders like this, is unique. And the way it manifests is unique. And the way they deal with it is unique. And their doctors look at this and they're used to putting things in patterns, right? And what's common about this, and how do these things, and for something that's unique in so many different facets, it's very difficult for them to give you the treatment and the care you need. And just everybody around you is like, well, they're as lost as you are. I remember when I had cancer, one of the first things I learned was it was actually harder on the people around me than on me, because I could do like you did. I could fight it. I could push through it. I could go be active about it. They couldn't. They just had to watch and see what happened.
I think that's such an interesting transition. I don't know if you meant to do that, Kevin, but I think when we're talking about this year, and I know when I've talked to Marni, so much has been kind of her looking at her disease and what does that mean for her. But I'd love for you to dive into some of that soul searching you did, but I think it also included your husband. And I know that's part of what's happened. And interestingly, you introduced that very perfectly, Kevin. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, so when I got sick, the world became about me, and it became about medical treatments and what do we do. And when we realized that my world, it isn't my world, and that's what I realize now. But at the time, it was my world changed. Okay, my career I lost, my mobility I was losing, all these other things. My husband was like, you need to find a way to get happy. You need to find a way. I shrunk back. I have to rewind a little bit, and I sunk into a deep, deep depression. Effie Parks runs a podcast that Once Upon a Gene, and she very generously gave me a little segment that she released last week and is going to release again tomorrow morning because it ties into this. But a story about how early on in my diagnosis, I was very suicidal. I did not handle this very well. I think it's common. We lose so much, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but how I got myself out of that, it involves football. Anyone who knows me, that doesn't surprise them. But it involves my husband, and my husband pulling me out of that depression using things I love like football, and then helping me by saying, you need to find something, go out, find what lights you up. And he supported me, and I found advocacy, and I jumped in. And what did he do? He picked up the slack of no income. He picked up the slack of cleaning, and he picked up the slack of everything, laundry, of everything. And in that, my husband shrank, if that makes any sense. You know, he lost a bit of himself, his dreams, his everything, while I was off doing mine. And so he was great about it, but you can tell when a piece of somebody is missing, especially when it's somebody you love and you care about. And we look back last year or the year before, and here I am, and I'm off doing what I love doing, and here he is. And I just looked at him and I said, and it was like a piece of me was dying too, because he wasn't happy. He would never tell me he wasn't happy, and he would never say anything like that. But I just looked at him and said, what is it you want? And we talked about it, and my husband is an attorney, and his dream was always to join the JAG Corps, the military. And we talked about it, and I found out he wasn't doing it because he was afraid he couldn't. What if he gets deployed? What if he, you know, how am I going to who's going to take care of me? Who's going to, any of this? And the weight of that, of, oh my gosh, am I keeping him from his dreams? And it was really time for me to assess, how much can I do? How much can I not do? How much am I holding back? Maybe holding back isn't the right word, but what have I given into in this disease that I am now affecting the person I love most in this world? Can I do a little more? Can we make it work where he can go for his dreams? Can we meet halfway? How can we make this work? I realized that this marriage isn't just about me. And yes, maybe I make up 75% of what we need to focus on, but he still gets the remaining, and he's allowed to go after his dreams. And I spent time working on showing him, I can take care of myself if you're not here. I can do this, or I know how to reach out for help if I can't take care of myself. And more importantly, I will reach out for help, because I'm a little bit stubborn. And, you know, I think he was more afraid that if he wasn't here, I wouldn't reach out for help. So he went through the application process, and because of COVID, it took like over a year, you know, to get through the review boards and different things like that. And during that whole time, you know, it's, let me do a little bit more. Let's focus on, I switched doctors. I started getting a whole team behind me to change how I was treated. And he did it, and he went through training, and for the time he was gone, it wasn't easy. But it was worth it. It's worth it to see how proud he is of himself, how proud I am of him, and that he followed his dream, and he got to do it. And that's what this life is supposed to be. I'm fortunate in that my disease, I'm not on a clock, if that makes sense. I'm not going to pass away from my disease. So I have to figure out, how am I going to live this life, the rest of my life, with it? And my husband is a huge part of that. And so this can't all be about me. It can mostly be about me. I'm okay with that. But
there's some things in marriages that just go one way, you know.
Right, like the fact I got 2 cats when he swore I would only be getting 1, but we came home with 2.
You know, it's interesting. I think as you're saying it too, I'm looking and seeing your pride in him, but I also think accidentally you found pride in yourself too, because you learned how to deal with this disease that you deal with every day. But you said, okay, we're going to figure out how to make this work. If you need to leave for 3 months, what do I need to do? And I think that's even a huge acknowledgement, because I'm sure he had seen you at your worst, and his fears are there, and worry that, oh my gosh, what if she feels this way again? But look how far you both have come in acknowledging those breakthroughs and really acknowledging each other. And I think that's something that, you know, isn't always talked about, because it's hard. I think rare disease or chronic disease or any disease often makes or breaks families, right? I mean, there's so many you hear of this overcoming, but what does that take to overcome? It's not just you. So I think it's interesting to see how much, you know, you have supported him, but also what you've learned. And I'd love for you just to share a couple of those takeaways with the viewers. Like, you know, what is the biggest thing you've learned in this, letting him follow his dreams and learning how to care for yourself?
This is hard. Like, not this is hard answering your question.
Yeah,
That
right.
this is hard. That I don't know how to balance. I thought I did, and it would be all or nothing. So in the beginning, it was all towards the disease and what I needed for self-care, and I would be the girl on the couch. But I would never clean, and I would never try to prep a meal, and I would never do any of that. Then I went into super mode, right? Where I'm going to do the laundry, and I'm going to clean, and I'm going to be super wife, and we're going to go out all the time, and everything you want to do, yes, you know. And then I became the girl on the floor because I couldn't move.
I too know all those girls.
Yeah, the takeaway is I listen to the same people on the stage, right, that talk about how they made it through. And I go, how, right? Please just write me the roadmap. And the truth is there is no roadmap. There is stumbling and bumbling and the fights we get into because I go, if I tell you no, don't question me. And he goes, okay, I'm not gonna. I know that means you can't do it. And then I go, no. And he goes, why? And I go, you said. But it's not because he doesn't, because he does. He loves me and he supports me. But this is just human interaction. This is a husband and a wife. And if it wasn't over a rare disease, it would be over who knows what. It would, you know, this is just life. This is just figuring out anything. And that's what I laugh about. That's why I joke about the good, the bad, and the incredibly funny, because if you take out the rare disease portion of this and insert any other situation in a marriage, it is what it is. The key is the communication, is no matter what, we step back and we'll talk about it. And we've had those tough conversations of where I've had to look at him and go, I do not want to be that chain around your neck. I don't want you to be with me because I'm your sick wife and you made a vow and that is why you're with me. And because I think all of us who get sick have that ingrained fear that is why your partner stays with you. No matter how much in love you are before that diagnosis comes down, that diagnosis will crumble any self-confidence you have. I don't care if you look like Blake Lively and are the most gorgeous person, or Jason Momoa, or, you know, that diagnosis comes down, you lose your job, you lose whatever, your confidence is rocked. And he looked at me and he's like, he's like, I'm with you no matter what. I love you and we will figure it out. And that is always in the back of my mind, is even if he questions, when I go, no, and he goes, why? I go, he loves me. So that's my advice to the person that you're struggling in that marriage, to both people, is let that voice in the back of your head override that momentary, oh, he did it again, or oh, she did it again, you know?
I don't know your husband. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, but I'm going to speak for all men. That question, why, isn't like, why, what, it's no, what's up, what's going on? He's actually trying to figure out what's behind the no so that he can give you more care, or leave you alone if that's what you needed at the moment. So it's not always the, attacking why. It's often, tell me more.
You're probably right. And you're actually probably 100% right. But from the female perspective, it's like, why are you questioning me? And he's probably like, well, you look okay. What's actually wrong?
Yeah, it's tough. I know that in Rare New England, we've started these support discussions that we have, and we have one for patients and we have one for caregivers. And I think that story you just told about having that conversation between the patient and the caregiver is critical, and something to learn from, and maybe to highlight a bit. I remember when I first got into doing this, we were doing some work and we were looking at how do you find out, where people are, what they're thinking, and stumbled on this series of studies about caregivers, and they were doing these interviews with them. And many of the caregivers were like, I didn't volunteer for this. It grabbed me. And now I feel like myself, I'm committed to this and I have no way out. And it was just like there were these deep levels that you could go to. And I think that you picked up on it with your husband. Something's off. Yeah. And you dealt with it. And I think that that's fantastic. And that's a lesson for others to learn. But you can't tell them how, because it's a different relationship.
But I also I think it's important for caregivers to understand that guilt, and it's okay and this goes both ways, okay? We as patients have to understand that a caregiver can hate your disease, they can hate the situation, and they don't hate you. You have to be able to separate that emotional response. It took me I'm still getting there, right? But in the beginning, when John, my husband, would talk about how he hates it, it would be like, oh, he hates me, he hates this. That's not it. He hates it as much as I hate it. But hearing somebody say that they hate the situation is hard. It's a very hard truth to hear, but it's actually a mirror of your own truth. It's
absolutely.
But if you shut down, if you get attacked, then that caregiver, that person you love, will never open up again to you. And that's poison. That is poison in the relationship. Yeah. So it's hard. And people make mistakes. I mean, I've had to go back and reapproach John and say, the way I reacted was wrong. And I want to be there and I want to be open to you. So talk to me. Let's work on talking. And point out if I'm doing the face or I'm, getting angry.
We all know those faces.
Yeah. Like let's work on this and let's talk about it, because I do want to spend my life with him, and I'm seeing the red flags of the way I've acted and the things I've done. And listen, neither one of us you're not giving a roadmap on how to handle any of this. It's about recognizing that you can admit you didn't handle it well. You want to handle it better, and let's try to figure this out.
And I think that's so key. And again, communication. I think it all comes down with communication in so many relationships, whether rare disease or not. I think that's what you're saying too. I do want to, so there's a few people online. I just wanted to go to a couple of these. Somebody said, love the acknowledgement of how much it affects the spouse's schedule, lifestyle, chores, etc. And that's absolutely true. It happens to you, it happened to me, but it's not just me. Right. When I had my illness early in life, I was in my 20s. And so that happened to me and my parents and my brother and my college friends. They were the support that I had to work with. Mm-hmm. And they did work with me, and that's hard. And, as I got older, it became my husband and my family and friends. But, I think you're right. Like, we're lucky we have those people to help us, but how do you have that communication?
Right. One of the things that helped John when I was at my sickest, with all the surgeries and all that, I made sure to support him having an outside life, right? Like, go out with the guys. I'm just going to sit here on the couch. I'm happy on the couch. Go play poker with the guys. Go do this. Go do that. I was never resentful of him going out and doing something to blow off some steam, because I knew I'm going to lay here and I'm not going to be much fun to be around. Why do you need to be here? And when I talk to people at support group or I do things like that, and they get upset if their partner, spouse, parent, whomever wants to get away for a little bit, I try to stress that caregivers need a place. They need a safe space. They need a place to go blow off steam. They need just a place to regroup also. And I think that is so important.
Right. So somebody also just kind of acknowledged the fact that with a rare disease, it's hard to find balance. One day you can do more, and other days that much can overwhelm you and make you feel sick. And I think, Marni, you mentioned that. And I think it's having the flexibility and the recognition that some days are better than others. And maybe if it's a good day, let's go do something. Or if it's a bad day, but that's when you have something planned, how do you balance that? And I think that's what's really neat to see what you're doing this year too. You're figuring out ways to commit to things, but having the flexibility if you need to change. Actually, of course, my mom is watching and she has some comments. I'll get to those later, but she's just telling stories about me. But I wanted to actually transition a bit to talk a little bit about Uplifting Athletes, because I know they have played a big part in what you have been doing in this past year as well. And I wanted to give you the floor to talk about that.
Okay, sure. So those of you who don't know, Uplifting Athletes is a 501c3 charity, but the way Uplifting Athletes actually started is it actually started back in 2003 as a single event, a fundraising event. And then they didn't turn into a charity until 2007. And their goal is to inspire the rare disease community with hope through sport. That actually resonates a lot with me because, as I stated earlier, before I met Uplifting Athletes, what got me through my suicidal stage was football. And then how I met Uplifting Athletes was I was at a conference and I was sitting at a table and I overheard, I was literally sitting there locking in my fantasy football picks. And I overheard a table of really tall guys talking fantasy football. And they sounded like they really knew what they were talking about. And I was like, okay. And I was listening and they were making some really, really good points. And I was like, oh, that's a group of people I would probably get along with. I had no idea they were with an organization. I didn't know anything about them. It was one of the first conferences I had ever been with. I am an extroverted introvert where I'm so shy that I'm outgoing. Is that what it is? Where you force yourself to be like outgoing because you're so painfully shy. So anyway, I was listening to what they said. So I went up to them and I introduced myself. Just seemed like people I would like. They gave me their cards. Turned out they were from Uplifting Athletes. Okay. And then I left them and immediately changed my lineup because they had some really, really good points. Later that year, I was sitting at watching the NFL, and they do that 1 week where they do my cause, my cleats. And I saw that I'm a huge Giants fan. And I said, you know what? I wonder if anybody's doing a rare disease cause. That would be cool. So I Googled the Giants and I went through and I saw that a player on the Giants was doing Uplifting Athletes as a cause. So I spent weeks trying to bid on these cleats. John, I want these for Christmas. And he's like, okay. I couldn't get the cleats. I couldn't find them anywhere. I couldn't see where to bid on them. So I reached out to Uplifting Athletes. It turns out the player, Riley Dixon, gave the cleats away to a kid with rare diseases. So you can't get mad at that. There's no way I can get mad. It's a great thing to do. But what Uplifting Athletes did when they found out that I was trying to get the cleats is they reached out to Riley Dixon and he signed a pair of cleats and mailed them to me the following week. So that was the start of my relationship with them. Those cleats meant the world to me because I always say it was the ripple in the pond. It was probably a 20-second thing that Riley Dixon did, and that meant so much to me. It was an act of kindness that in turn inspired me to help many other people, that rock you throw in the pond and the ripple goes out. And I got more involved in Uplifting Athletes because I realized from how much that meant to me, seeing rare diseases represented in the NFL just was incredibly powerful. And the correlation between the mental fortitude it takes to become an elite athlete and what the rare disease community goes through, the sacrifice, the dedication of the loved ones, they mirror each other. They're perfect allies. I don't understand why a million other people didn't think of this beforehand. And you hear these stories of people gaining immense inspiration by the underdog in sports. We're the ultimate underdogs and we do amazing things. This community moves mountains and they just go together so seamlessly. And what's amazing about Uplifting Athletes is Uplifting Athletes mainly is involved, and they have chapters, and their chapters are on the college level. So the way these chapters are formed are by the college athletes, by the football teams. It's not the schools who decide, it's the student athletes that decide that they want to form a chapter. And then it is up to the student athletes to keep that chapter going. Currently, I believe there's about 23 chapters. The oldest, Penn State, who are the ones, they've been going strong. They are the ones who originally started with that original event back in 2003. And what kind of men, I mean, I look back to when I was in college and what I was thinking of at that time, you know, to go, I want to represent and help the rare disease community. And these are just outstanding individuals to want to do that. And so to want to get involved with them, to want to bring attention to what these young men are doing. I think last year for the pro days, so when college players are moving on to potentially be in the NFL, they put on a pro day. Would be the combine, but with COVID, they did their pro days. I think for representing, raising money and representing Uplifting Athletes, I think there were over 60 something players that did it last year. That's remarkable. That is because these people understand, these men understand they are brothers, they are fathers, they are sons of people who are affected. They see us. So I don't work for, I know it sounds like I work for Uplifting Athletes, but I don't. I'm really just somebody who was inspired, who has been helped out by them, who has seen what can happen. And I try to connect people with chapters that are around them, because I think the players benefit when they see that there are people that behind what they're doing. So for example, I developed a really close relationship with the Northwestern chapter in Chicago. They personally motivated me last year when they reached out. An article was written about my struggles during COVID, and I didn't know who these people were. And they reached out to me and literally asked me, what can we do to help you? And what can we do to help the rare disease community? And they have become some of my closest friends. We stay in contact. These are 20-something-year-old men that check in after my surgeries, that bet me, challenged me, because I don't want to say bet, to figure out how, you know, they will go for they'll fight for the title game if I fight to walk again. And they did. You know what? They went for against Ohio State, and I can walk 80% of the time without a cane now. These are relationships and bonds that transcend football. Their season got postponed because of COVID, and I checked in with them, and their response to me was, Marni, this is football. How are you doing? Are you getting your treatments? Are you being taken care of? How is your community? That's life. I have no words. And this happens because of organizations and people like Brett Brackett, Rob Long, Levi Norwood, people over at Uplifting Athletes, and those that came before them that introduced the rare disease community in the sports world and connected them.
It's a great cause, and the whole story, you know, how Rob got started with it, and you know, his football career got cut short because of disease. I think it's a wonderful group. It reminds me too that, you know, right now the Special Olympics are going on, and I caught some of it last night, and it was working in this space and caring about this community. You watch that, and there was a guy from Poland playing ping pong, and he was someone who had skeletal, you know, malformations, and he was kicking butt. I mean, he was like the favorite, the ringer. And then the wheelchair rugby was on, and I used to play regular rugby, and I was getting into it. It's a different game, but the intensity's the same, you know, and it really was inspiring. And those guys are they're just the picture of, oh yes, I've got something wrong here, but you know what? Inside, I'm still a person, and I'm still human, so what? I'm a little different than you are, but that doesn't mean I'm the one who's abnormal. Look, I can kick butt in ping pong or rugby.
Well, it's funny because a lot of my stories, I mean, it revolve around uplifting athletes. A lot of my whole year changed after that article came out last year. When I got interviewed about the struggles during COVID, I wasn't getting treatment. I was in a really bad place. I didn't realize how raw. That was the start of me. I always pride myself on being open, but I had never really been raw. And that article was raw. I was angry. I was in pain. I'm surprised I didn't get phone calls from people like, are you okay? So coincidentally, right after that, Uplifting Athletes was doing their inaugural 7,000 mile challenge, which was just something you could form a team and you could just do, walk, bike, run, do something in honor of 7,000, 7,000 rare diseases. So I threw together a team. I didn't raise any money. I said, you know what? It's a really bad year for everyone. Let's, as a team, just do something. And I had pledged that over 10 days, I would walk 20 miles. I can do that. That sounds great. Over the 10 days, I walked, I think, 110 miles. And that was what started this whole in my head of, whoa, what can I really do? What am I really capable of? Now, I don't recommend anybody go from 0 to 110 miles, but, and I certainly paid the price for it. But I started this whole questioning of what are limitations? What are real limitations? Everybody has real limitations. 1,000%. I am not out here saying diseases are made up, you're faking. It's not. Everybody has real limitations. But what are real? What are limitations that can be skirted with some modification? And what are the limitations we impose on ourselves out of fear? I was afraid. I was afraid of making my disease worse. I was afraid that this is my future. So I accepted it. And I never tried anything different. And so that is where the year was born for me. And so the last year has been challenging my understanding of limitations. And that is where I gave birth really to what I'm calling the Press for Hope movement, which is what is real? What are we afraid of? What is it that we've always wanted to try, but have been too afraid to try because of failure, because of who knows what? That's safe for us. I'm not saying for us to go, like I cannot, because of my implants, because of different things, I cannot ever scuba dive again. The pressure. I'm not about to go do that. That is a hard no for me. But I have learned that there is a lot more I'm capable of, and there's a lot more I could do with certain modifications than I ever thought possible. And I was holding myself back. I always wanted to try art, right? Something so simple, but I get these horrific tremors in my hands. My art is terrible, but I'm doing it.
I have to say, as you're saying these questions, it brings me to tears, because I think personally, I wasn't a risk taker. That's not the right word, but I was always up for trying anything. And I think illness puts a fear in you. And I often, not all the time, but I often give into that fear. And I know we've talked, and a lot of what you're doing is physically building yourself stronger and doing some new workouts and new activities. And that scares me, because I'm so afraid that what if I go too far and it causes me to have a TIA and fall down, or, what if you move your arm so far and then you can't move it the next day? And so I think what you're saying speaks to me, but I'm guessing it speaks to so many other people and patients. So it really is awesome that you're questioning that and you're sharing what you're questioning, because I know for me, it really hits home, and that's something that I think as well. And how have you been able to incrementally challenge those limitations?
Well, the key is incremental. Okay, nothing has been overnight. And the first key was to get the right team. So everything I've done has been 100% doctor supervised. I got a new doctor who was open to different ideas and to not just a surgery, or, you know, he was open to physical therapy. He was open to different modalities. And I got a trainer who is certified in strength. You know, nothing wrong with a trainer at a gym with 20 credits of CEUs, but I needed somebody who, we have unique metabolic and body situations, and I needed somebody who would understand more. So he's a certified Olympic trainer, strength trainer, doctor of physical. I mean, he's got so many letters after his name. He probably made them up at this point, but who really understands. He's trained with professional athletes and different things, because if I was going to do this, I needed to make sure that I was putting my trust in the right people. And I'll be honest, there was nobody out there that believed in me other than me, you know, and him. Everybody else thought I was nuts to try this. Oh, and my doctor, because my doctor wouldn't have signed off. My doctor was like, I think this is a great idea. I don't know how far you're going to get, but I had doctors tell me I'll never get the use of my arm back. I've had other, you know, even I think my husband was afraid. He was skeptical. He never told me no. You know, nobody ever said no, but I just wanted to see, what can I do? We spent 3 months just doing physical therapy, just trying to get movement, you know, and we took it from there. So I think the most important, and I want to stress, this is not a physical challenge. This is not if you cannot physically do something, I don't want anybody to think, oh, you know, but I think there's something for everyone to really, that we want to do it, whether it's to work up to cooking a meal for ourselves, to modify things to get to that point, to try art, to go for a walk or a roll, or you know, to get ourselves to be able to go swim, you know, modified in something. I think this is about understanding that there is life out there for us, beyond fear. I am terrified. I'm terrified of so much all the time. I'm afraid, exactly like you said, Lisa, of doing too much, not doing enough, doing too much. This disease, I don't know when this disease is going to take my leg. You know, it's going to be so bad I don't get it back. The muscles atrophy or this or that. Did I do enough before then? Did something I do set it off? It's scary. I'm terrified. I live every single day afraid. And that's a horrible way to be. This is a little bit of control I can take back. That's a healthy control. It's not developing an eating disorder, which I was borderline for too, because that was one way that I felt I could control. This is something that incrementally, piece by piece, I started to map out my body. And like someone said earlier, you don't know one day how you're going to be into the next. By doing this, I know my body inside and out now. I've learned the signs and the signals, and I can almost predict when I'm going to be too far, or what tomorrow's going to be. Or, I mean, weather throwing the barometric pressure changing, or, you know, all that stuff I can't control. But physiologically, I am more in tune with my body now because I've had to pay attention to it. I've had to listen to it. It's really interesting. I don't have the answers for everyone. I don't know if this is right. I don't know. I hate to be like this. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be so honest with everyone. I just don't want people to be afraid all the time. And I know what that feels like, because even now as I sit here, I'm terrified. I'm petrified of tomorrow.
You know, we have a comment from the audience, and somebody wrote, yes, I have not walked in my neighborhood or hiking trail since last September because I fear having a weak spell. It's a real thing. However, I've lost a fear of the bigger things. I've done many things I never would have pre-diagnosis. You describe this way of life very well.
Thank you.
Kevin, I'm going to jump in for 1 second. Can you, Marni, because I know this, and again, it was something that shocked me because I had never heard of regional pain syndrome prior to, meeting you and Barbie and some of the other advocates. Can you explain what it feels like when day in and day out? So I remember you sometimes have to wear something on your arm because a touch can feel like sharp, like knives going into your arm. And I think sometimes people might not even understand that. So just the fact that you're saying, I'm getting up every day and walking, or I'm going to do exercise. There were days I saw you at different conferences where you couldn't do it. So I just wanted you to give that perspective, if you would.
Yeah, sure. And those are still you know what I look like, and I would look like that working out. It's just, I use that to fuel me a little bit more now. But so anybody who's had any sort of nerve pain can understand when I say burning. It's not that sharp, like an ache. It is a burn. And with complex regional pain syndrome, a lot of times people will describe it as like a hot stabbing poker or an electrical jolt going down. I learned to adjust by wearing compression sleeves. Now, that causes more pain, but what it did for me was it was a constant level of pain. So instead of, I'm very sensitive, it's called allodynia, where sensation will trigger immense pain. By one level of pain, I can mentally adjust to the amount of pain as opposed to different air puffs coming. And then, you're trying to adjust to different spikes in pain. So one of the ways I learned to cope was by wearing arm sleeves. So it was always one steady pressure point of pain. Some people do that. Some people don't. Some people can't handle any touch on their skin whatsoever. Everybody's different in that regard. A lot of people get the common is that electrical feeling. What else happens? The limbs will swell a lot and they'll sweat, like the fluid will come out. What is it called? The mottling, where you get that different color on the skin. Temperature changes, so it'll go really red, or my skin I tend to go cold, so it'll go like bluish. And I feel like the outside of my skin gets warm with the inside the outside gets very cold with the inside being hot. So it's like, I explain it as it's being like flowing lava encased in a brick of ice. So it's all sorts of sensory crazy going on. And it's bad. It gets really, really bad. But I started to, and this is me, this is not something I'm preaching to anybody. I spent so much time on the couch and not doing, and just being in such excruciating pain that I looked at it and I said, if I'm going to be here, and my doctor said, nothing I do is going to make it worse, right? Like I'm not going to make my disease worse, which is one of the things that I was always afraid of, is that if I do more, I'm going to make it worse. That I want to do something to make it worth it that I'm laying on this couch. And so that's when I do this. Every time that I'm bad, I will go work out for 5 minutes. If I can't do the 5 minutes, fine. If I can do the 5 minutes, I keep going until I can't do it. It's the simple thing of, I show up for me, it's working out. Pick whatever it is. Pick the art, pick journaling, pick, poetry, pick something that you want to do for you, to show up for you and commit to doing. Take out the working out, because that seems like an overwhelming and daunting task. But find something that's for you. Reading, escape in reading, something that you can commit to for 5 minutes, even when you're feeling your worst. And if you can do it for 5 minutes, do it for 5 more minutes. And then if you can do it for 5 more minutes, do it for 5 more minutes. If you can't do it for 5 minutes, at least you tried, you showed up for yourself, and you're proud, and be proud of that. Own it. And I put up an Instagram video earlier this week of me failing. Do not be afraid to fail. Failing at something does not equate to being a failure. And that is the biggest thing you need to understand.
Yeah, there's a lot of very successful and famous people who say their success came from failing often.
Yeah.
And it's growth. And I like how you're cautioning people not to just do what Marni's doing, but what works for them. That's important. But I think that just go a little bit more. Can I do just a little bit more? And if I can't, don't beat yourself up about it. Tomorrow, let me just get to where I was, right? And then maybe the next day a little bit more. So you just keep that mindset of, I can do just a little bit more. So Lisa, we're going pretty long on time here.
Sorry, I babbled.
We'll do some live decision making here. Where do you want to go next?
So I feel like the one thing I want to do is just, I think we've covered a lot of great information. So I do want to ask if you have any final words for our viewers, I think as we kind of get close to wrapping up. And also if you could tell people where to find you, where they can learn more, when and where is Press for Hope happening and what does that look like? So yeah, just kind of a little wrap up, if you would,
Sure.
of the things everybody needs to know.
So I set myself a goal of this year to take on Northwestern, since they meant so much to me, beat their overall amount of weight they pressed for their charity bench press competition on September 28th. That had to get moved because I was going to be doing it parallel to the Global Genes Patient Advocacy Summit, and that went virtual. So I'm trying to scramble to find a new location for it. So anybody out there have any ideas? I'm open to ideas, but we're looking for a new location to hold the bench press competition. And yes, we're looking at me breaking over 7,000 pounds bench pressing. That is a lofty goal, but it's in honor of the more than 7,000 known rare diseases. I am not blind to the fact that I might fail, but the way I look at it is there is no greater community I would rather fail in front of than this rare disease community. And I'm comfortable with that. I hope I don't fail. I would love to beat it, but if I do fail, that's fine too. But in between now and then, I will announce it when we have a new date and location. I am asking people to consider getting involved, not bench pressing 7,000 pounds, but figure out your impossible. Figure out something you want to try to do, something maybe you used to do and you don't anymore. Maybe something you always wanted to try, and do it and tag it with the hashtag Press for Hope, or don't tag it, but do it for yourself, or start to think about limitations, your own limitations and things you might be afraid of, and maybe, just start to reassess them a little bit. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Perfectly Rare. I love cats, so that's easy. I'm also on Instagram on Perfectly Rare on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook under, I think, Marni Cartelli is. Yeah, that's what I'm under on Facebook. And the Press for Hope does have a Twitter page. It's not super active right now until we have all this stuff locked up. Then it'll get a little more active. But I hope everyone will get involved a little bit. I hope you understand the purpose behind it and know that I'm really not trying to make anybody do anything that they aren't able to do or don't want to do. I just want you to know you're not alone with the fear and the trepidation. And if you're not okay right now in the past year and everything that's going on, most of us aren't, and you're not alone.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say at the end of this, I will put your contact information at the bottom of this post so people can find you.
You can even put my email if you want, and anybody, if you want to reach out, if anybody, that's fine too.
Awesome. Awesome. And I don't know, Kevin, if you have anything else or if we want to go ahead and wrap up. And I just want to say thank you, Marni. Not only are you a friend, but you inspire me and we can have the real conversations. And I'm very honored that you had this here with us at Rare New England.
Thank you for having me. I mean it. Thank you. I'm a big fan of Rare New England. So even though I'm in New York.
Close enough.
You're close. So before we close, we like to remind our viewers that we give them an opportunity to share comments or questions or ask questions from our prior shows. And so in the future, you can ask for this one if you weren't able to do it live. We call it RNE in Motion, and it's a perfect way to expand upon our mission of engaging with our community. We'd love to hear from you and interact with you about our guests and our topics. You can reach out to info@rarenewengland.org. Thank you again, Marni, for taking the time to be with us today. This is a great conversation, and I always learn a lot from you, and I'm always inspired by the way you approach, your life situation. This show wouldn't be possible without the generous sponsorship of our show sponsors: Pfizer, Ultragenyx, Vertex, Horizon, and the law offices of Weiner, Jackson, and Simmons. We appreciate your continued support, and we are always looking for other sponsors and guests, so please reach out to us via our website if you are interested. From all of us at Rare New England and all the patients and families who keep rare disease in motion, thank you for watching, and I'll take Lisa's line. And remember, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, then think zebras.